What's up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you another interlude episode of RotoBallers official MMA podcast. Tab that. This is a very special interlude episode. I am here in Beaver Creek, Ohio, sitting in some lovely outdoor seating, and with me here today.
This is Ilyaz, Mamadaliyev, the Turkish Machine.
So, real quick, when did you start going by the Turkish Machine? Because I love the nickname.
This was right before my last fight. I thought about, putting a poll out to see what the fans would pick, and that was one of the things that they voted for, which was the Turkish Machine, and I like that because I work really hard, so it fits me.
So, it's been a long time since you've been on the show, and dude, we're gonna walk our way backward, but most recently, Will Worley. You fought him in 24/7. It's usually a Pittsburgh-based promotion, but you got to fight him, I think, in Sharonville, Ohio.
Yes.
And you get the knockout, and it was the first time that I watched your fighting and thought, like, that is true put him out knockout power. It's different than, when you were chopping down Nicholas Maupin's legs. This was a one shot. This was a hard shot against a really seasoned opponent. How'd you feel about that?
My coach kept telling me that, at 145 I'm going to be really strong, but it wasn't until this fight that I actually felt it. Even though the guy was heavier, I felt I was a lot stronger than he was in the striking everywhere. When he would go for takedowns, I was able to defend it easily, not waste a lot of energy. And in the first round, when I dropped him, I thought maybe that's it. I'll finish it with ground and pound, but he survived. He was a very tough guy. Then when it went into the second round, usually I avoid punches, but this time, for some reason, I just wanted it to be a war. I even told them backstage, when they interviewed me, I really wanted a war. I wouldn't trade that. I would have had a fight like that 10 out of 10 times. I wouldn't want a quick finish. That was the best way to end the fight, with that knockout.
And it must have been a tough fight to prepare for, because the dude had a bare-knuckle boxing knockout win. And he had experience, but you also knew that he was going to be able, or he was going to try to take you down at some point in the fight. And so you got to be ready for, a war on the feet, but you also got to keep in mind that this guy might shoot a double at any point.
Not just that, but I remember when I pulled up to the fight, I saw him warming up, and he's like throwing fancy kicks and things I haven't seen him really throw that much of. And he had a perfect game plan against me, because everything he was doing in the warm-up, I was like, if I was fighting myself, this is what I would do. So he was well prepared. He had, like I told you before when we talked, 7 belts as just in MMA. That bare knuckle experience, that's a crazy experience to have under your belt. And very tough guy. I knew he was not gonna just take one punch and go down. I knew he was gonna try to hurt me, and he did. He hit me with a lot of, that was probably the hardest I've been hit in my career so far, with the shots he was hitting me with. He hit me with a solid knee right on the chin, and I remember like everything went silent, and I'm like, okay, now we have to see what I'm made of. And that's when I pushed, and I was able to I don't want to say break him, because that's kind of disrespectful, but I feel like I broke him in that fight.
And so how do you link up with 24/7 Sports? Because like we said before, they're usually a Pittsburgh-based promotion, and they're kind of, they've been kind of growing in prominence of late, but it's been kind of a quick amount of time that they've kind of had their rise.
It was a very good show. They got in contact with my coach, and they wanted somebody who would sell tickets, basically, and they reached out to me and my coach, so we accepted. Once they had an offer for us, we accepted the fight. And I was happy to be part of that show, because they were very professional. Everybody working there was very nice, from the minute we got to the weigh-ins to after the fight, and even just the way they handled things. I could work with a company like that all the time. I loved it. It was an amazing experience.
And so now, in the aftermath of this knockout win, given how much time has passed, and we're going to get into the roller coaster time that it was beforehand, but now that you have some time to reflect on that victory, how do you feel about it, and how do you feel moving forward?
I got past the victory I would say same night or one day afterwards. I was like, okay, what's next? I wanted to know what was coming up. I already texted my coach. I was like, you think we can get a fight for October, November? And then I texted my management, first round management. I was like, I'm ready. I want another fight right away. It was a tough fight, but it was small injuries that would heal up. I wanted to get active. The thing with me constantly training now, after a fight, the hunger is back right away. I want to get back in. I want to get in the fight again, and I just love that feeling of hard work paying off.
And so you're 4-2 as a professional now. And it's fun that we're recording this on a Tuesday because in an hour or so, the Contender Series is going off. And I said it when we were eating some delicious Turkish food not about an hour ago that I really think the gap between you and the guys that are making it onto the Contender Series and that are fighting in these bigger regional promotions is a lot smaller now than it used to be. And that's significant because you're only 25 years old. And so, I know that it's always, what's next and taking each day at a time, but how are you approaching your career moving forward right now?
The only thing that's in my control is being able to continue to train and continue to get better, because if I'm not getting better, if I'm not tracking, how much better I've gotten, or if I'm not seeing any progress, then that in my eyes is failing, because I do want to get on the Contender Series. I think that's an amazing opportunity to get on the show. Build a fan base before you even get into the UFC. Experience the people behind the scenes and everything. I think, like you said, the gap is not that far between me and them. All the canceled fights I've had, if I had those fights, who knows? Maybe I would have already had the opportunity. But everything happens for a reason, and right now I'm ready. My coach told me I have maybe 2, at most 3 fights left. So we'll see how it goes, and that is what I want. I want the Contender Series shot.
And career-wise, and for putting yourself out there, I've noticed over the last year that I think you're doing a lot better on Snapchat and on Twitter of, promoting yourself, but, putting more information out there. It seemed like before it just wasn't as polished of a social media presence. Now you've got, you've got great photography, yes, and you're putting great messages with it.
Yes. I do have a photographer, a camera guy that works with me doing the videos for me. Now fans get to see the behind the scenes. A lot of the times in the past, I would show up to a fight that's at welterweight or 155, and my body would look a certain way, and people thought, oh, he's not training because we're not seeing footage. But it's not that. It's just that I didn't have anybody helping me out, so it was all on my own. I would have to record on my own on my phone, and it wasn't very professional. But now I know where I want to end up, and these things have to happen, and shout out to Simon, who takes my pictures, and Reese, who does my videos, because they made a big difference. People have came up to me now, they recognize me a lot more. Kids come up to me all the time now. They're like, I saw this video, that video, and it's thanks to them. The supporters now get to see it, whether it's on Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, wherever it is, they can stay connected with me. And
to Ilyaz's camera team, I have to say, so let's then move backward in time, because the last time I had you on the show was after your awesome leg kick TKO over Nicholas Maupin, and then you were supposed to have 4 different fights that were supposed to be very unique challenges, and they were a step up in experience level and in competition. And it wasn't just, folks, we were talking about this earlier, it's not just that this should have been one fight. They were 3 months apart. You really should have had 4 fights in between this time. And, whether you go 500 in that stretch, whether you win all of them or lose all of them, I really think that you would have been, the better for it. But they kept falling through. And so what was that like, dealing with 4 straight fights, so much out of your control and so much time passing for a young fighter?
That was the hardest part, just losing the time, and I would always be, ready to fight, and then I get news that the show is canceled or the fight is canceled, and it was getting very difficult mentally. Physically, it wasn't bad because I was able to prepare a lot better, and I would think, oh, this is the best I've been. But then when a fight would get canceled for the next fight, I was even more prepared. So as far as physically, it wasn't a bad thing, but mentally it was challenging because people would ask me hey, what happened to that fight? I would have to explain to this person, but if they don't know MMA, they wouldn't really understand what's happening behind the scenes. It wasn't my fault, it was the shows falling through or the fight getting canceled, and it was difficult to a point where, like, when I would have a fight contract signed, I didn't even want to post about it because I was like, it's almost not gonna happen. Like, it's almost guaranteed it's not gonna happen.
That's hard to hear too. And like, so the thing about the Massey fight is people would never know from looking at that guy's professional MMA record how accomplished of a martial artist he is. He had a great kickboxing pedigree, and say what you said, before about, what your kind of approach was going into that fight and how you think it wasn't the best.
Going into that fight, I was dealing with so many personal things on the outside, and anybody that really knows me, including you, that would know that those details would have most likely had other people drop out of a fight. It was very personal matters, but instead of dropping out, because I was losing so much in those areas in life where, it was family or, just everything not working my way, I took that fight and I was like, I need to have this happen, especially with the cancellation of other fights. I was like, there's no way I'm not going to show up to this fight. Like, I could have easily said, like, hey, mentally I'm not ready. I don't want to, nobody would have said anything about it. But for me personally, that was going to be another loss, and I couldn't take another loss. So I showed up right before I walked out, even, like I was telling you earlier. I wasn't in the fight. My opponent was not Edward. It was me against myself, and that night I lost to myself,
And you wanted to, you told me too that you wanted to put him away in that fight. And that was the first time that you really went into a fight wanting to put someone away. And, ultimately you got caught in a submission in that fight.
I fought with a lot of anger. Instead of, choosing to go in there and just see how the fight plays out, which that's my style. I can straight up tell you, my coaches can tell you, I flow. I get better as the fight goes. I figure guys out. But in that fight, from the minute, the bell was going to ring, my whole point was to hurt him. And it wasn't because of him. He was a respectful guy. It was just me having so much, pain and losses in my life at that point. I was, like I said, I wasn't fighting him. I was just fighting everything that was going wrong in my life. That was my opponent that night. And life and God taught me a very valuable lesson to not ever fight like that again, because it was just, in my eyes, that was the worst performance I could have put on, and that's exactly what I did because of how I felt going in there.
And I texted you before the Worley fight, and I feel like I've known you long enough to where I can kind of tell when, your mind is on something else too. And I remember saying, like, dude, take care of business this weekend, and you're gonna feel just as good as you do at your best. I
was smiling, like, at the weigh-ins, even though it was, again, a 45 fight. The last fight was at 45, but I wasn't enjoying it before this. I wasn't enjoying it during that last fight because everything else was affecting me so much that it was hard to even put on a smile. And I'm not the type of person that can fake a smile. Everything about me is real. Like, if I'm smiling, that means you really made me smile, or I'm feeling good. But I'm glad it's behind us, and I learned my lesson, and now we move forward.
And now, instead of 4 straight fights getting canceled and coming off a loss, you're coming off a win against the best opponent that you've beaten so far, and in the most impressive fashion that you've done it.
When I got that fight offered right after that last loss, I accepted it because you accept fights as a fighter, but you worry a little more about certain opponents. And with him, I was like, okay, especially having all those belts, sometimes those belts don't mean anything, but when you look at the people they have fought, I was looking at all the guys, he was fighting big guys at 170, and I knew he was not going to be an easy fight. So getting past him and just seeing the difference, that me being happy, like weigh-ins on fight night, that big difference, it was incredible to experience, because now I know that should be the mentality every time. Just go in there, enjoy, no matter what's going to happen, because I was prepared for that Edward fight, physically, but because I wasn't mentally, the results showed. With this, because I was ready mentally, physically, the results showed. So I want to keep doing what works best for me, and that is to be mentally and physically ready.
And so, do you think that there's anything that you've been doing differently that led to you being able to put a guy away like you did against Worley your last time out?
It's outworking everybody. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, because most of these people are my teammates, and I just want to work harder than everybody else. If I can do that, I know that, physically at least I'm going to be super ready. So just not making excuses like, easily when I have a fight coming up, I could say, I skipped this training because I had family to deal with or this or that. I've done that in the past, I'll admit it. But I'm not going to do that anymore. I make time for training no matter when it is, how tired I am. I make sure that, if I have to rest one day or something, that's that only day. I don't do 2 rest days in a row or anything like that. In the past, I would have a fight coming up, and there might be 2-3 days where I wouldn't get to do any hard training, and then I get back that next day, put in a hard training session, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm ready. No, I wasn't. I was lying to myself. I was, basically delusional, and it upsets me because I was doing a career that was so risky where I could get seriously hurt, and I wasn't even taking it serious, if it makes sense.
And so, you had good things to say about 24/7. Do you think that, it's possible that your next fight is with that promotion, or do you have an idea of, what banner you're going to be fighting under next time?
At the moment, I'm waiting for my manager to see what type of opportunity he presents, but if I have to wait for too long or something, I don't really want to sit around, especially now that I'm 25. This is, probably where, because I saw Dana White saying that, he doesn't really like people above 30 to get into the promotion, which I understand unless you're high level in a different sport, then he takes you. But since I don't have any other experience from other sports, I have to make it in before 30, and I got to do whatever it takes.
And it's no doubt, you're still, very young for a fighter. 25, you got plenty of time. But it's definitely, you can't ignore that it is a critical stretch of years, And so what's it like right now working with first-round management and where, you want to be kind of in control of your, career but you also have to work with people and, who do this for a living and how to get you to the point that you want to be.
It's nice having first-round management because of the fact that, when I get into the bigger promotions, they're going to have all the connections and they're going to deal with that. But for now, while I'm on the local scene, for example, when I told them this 247 opportunity, they were like, yeah, let's take it. That's a really good fight. They work with me. That's what I like about them. They're not like, hey, if we don't take the fight, you're not going to get to fight. They don't do any of that. Like if I called them right now and said there's an opportunity and if it makes sense, they tell me to take it. That's what I like about working with them.
And there's so many promotions out there right now. And for any folks out there listening that might not know about all the, career opportunities that there are in mixed martial arts, there's Bellator and PFL, which is, very soon just going to probably be PFL, but it's going to be bigger. That's been a great prospect growing ground. There's always the international opportunity, too, to fight in ONE or Ryzen or EFC or organizations like that. Is that something that ever enters your horizon?
I did have an offer to fight in Turkey. I think it was last year. They were offering really good money, and it was plane tickets covered, hotel, everything covered. But I didn't have my. I couldn't travel out of country at that time. But I became a citizen, so if an opportunity like that came in, I wouldn't want to do like a deal where it's like 2 fights, 3 fights or something. But if it's a one-time thing, I don't mind. But at the end of the day, the UFC is the goal, though. I really want that because anybody that watches me or has known me, that's something I've always wanted, and I feel like if I do anything less, no disrespect to any of the promotions, but that's what people expect out of me, and that's what I expect out of myself, so I want to do that.
And you've been training with, UFC caliber talent for a while now. For as long as I've known you, there's at least been somebody at that level that you've been working closely with. And, you did work with Bryce Mitchell recently.
Yes. That was an amazing opportunity. Shout out to him who won recently this weekend.
Doug Nasty.
He's a very nice guy. If anybody doesn't know him and hasn't met him in person, he's the same way he is on TV that he is in person. He was very welcoming. Him and AJ that I trained with, who had a shot at the Contender Series, getting to train with 2 guys like that who were so welcoming, but getting to experience what it takes to be at their level. AJ at that time I think was 9-2, so he has more experience than me, but being able to go with them, see what it takes to be at that level, it opened my eyes because I can make it, and I am going to go down and train with them again. I want to be around people like that who are on the right path, And as long as I stay dedicated and with people like that around me, it's, I don't want to say almost guaranteed, but you have to make it. You have to.
And that is, that's the thing too, because obviously right now, for a guy in your position, the Contender Series is what you're aiming for. You know, there's other, you know, PFL does a Challenger Series now. There's a lot of different versions of that. But do you see people in the Contender Series who are 4-2? Not super often. Do you see people that are 5-2 and 6-2 all the time, every week? You know, it really is like there's a lot of fighters out there, and it's just about standing out in some way.
Standing out, having the right connections, it's all important. That's why having first-round management is very important. When they contacted me last year, I wanted to sign automatically. I told my coach about it, and being on the local scene, you might think, oh, okay, why do you need a big management group? But it's because of that, because I know where my future is going to end up, and the end goal is what's important. So being in contact with them, that's a plus. And having the coaches around me that I have, the teams that I train with, cross-training constantly, it's helped me big time to improve. And Contender Series, like you said, 4-2, maybe not a high chance of being in there, but 5, 6, 7-2, you see a lot of guys like that on there, and they stand out. Sometimes, no disrespect, but some of those guys, you know, they just have the connections and they make it on there. Who knows, you know? It could be 2 fights from now or 3 fights from now, but I do want to find out, you know.
And there's nothing wrong with getting an opportunity because you know somebody. That's right. What a lot of opportunities are. And I think, you know, another thing is that I think the Turkish market and the Turkish fan base, I think, is desirable for the UFC. You know, you see it just in this area of Beaver Creek, Ohio. You know, there's a strong Turkish community, and I've seen it firsthand, you know, now that we're meeting in person, of, you know, people identifying with that.
Mm-hmm. You see, if you think about it, there isn't that many, you know, if I asked you like, hey, name 5 or 10, you know, Turkish fighters, you probably wouldn't be able to, as much knowledge as you have on MMA. And it's because there isn't that many there's a lot of high level guys, but known guys, it's very rare. So recently on the Contender Series, there was a guy from Turkey who made it into the UFC. He got a contract, and that's just step one. And I want to show that I can make it too, and I can have other people follow along too. And because they need an example in a way, and I don't mind being the example. When I was, you know, starting my MMA career, I didn't have any Turkish fighter come up to me and say like, hey, you know, this is what you should do. This is the way you should take the path. And nobody told me that, so I had to figure it out myself, make the connections myself. But now, if there's other younger fighters, and there's a lot of them that come train with me, they're like, hey, when I turn 18, can you help me get a fight? I can. Because, you know, I want to see other people succeeding, not just Turkish people. If people, Americans from my gym, if I make it and I get to help them, I would love that. There's nothing more I would love to help somebody else make their dreams come true. That's just special, and I want to be able to do that.
And I think you've really seen it a lot, like Peruvian prospects. There's not many of them. There's not a ton of Peruvian fighters in the UFC, but I think that they've had a quicker path to maybe some of those opportunities because their fan bases and their country rallies around their success.
Yes, it's just in situations like that where you're saying, you know, there isn't that many of them. It's because this is a difficult path. If anybody thinks MMA is an easy path, it's not. You know, from the outside it might look like, oh, you know, he got his hand raised, but there's so much that goes behind the scenes. The training is the easy part. You get to have fun training and everything, but, you know, everything else, like fights getting canceled, not a lot of people can handle that. Imagine if you have nothing in your bank account and your fight gets canceled. Now you have to wait a few months to make, you know, money if that's what you do for a living. So those parts, I want to be the example. I want to, you know, show people that you can make it even if you're struggling, because the struggle isn't forever. You can change that, you know. And what matters is the end goal. And if you're focused, you're dedicated. A lot of the fighters that I see, they're not dedicated. And I used to be the same way where, you know, if I had a fight schedule, I'm training, you know, I'm working, but when I didn't have a fight schedule, I was just a typical person, just doing nothing, just wasting time. With this, it gives me a purpose. Like I wake up, I'm like, okay, for example, when I had the Will fight, September 9th, I have to win. And to do that, you have certain things you have to do. That's why I love the sport, and I want to help other people fall in love with it too.
And it's you gotta win and you gotta impress, and I think that you've been doing that a lot more. It hasn't just been getting victories.
Out of my last 10 fights, I won 8, and the 2 losses that I've had were against very tough guys.
So how do you have to adjust the way that you go about, because sponsors are such a big deal for a fighter in your position, and just what has the hustle and grind been like of trying to make sure that everything that's supporting you as a fighter and things that fighters rely on, making sure that you have that in the line?
See, when it comes to sponsors, they're a big part of my success and the improvement that I've seen, because of the fact that instead of having to go and work 40 hours or whatever a week, now I don't have to do as much. I work part-time, for example, right now, and the sponsors cover the rest of it, whether it's the gas money, if I'm getting a hotel, if I'm traveling. Like when I traveled to Arkansas, I spent about $1,000 for a few days just to go out there, get a hotel, get the training, the food. And when those sponsors are paying on time and everything, it helps me focus on my dream. If I don't have to work, just think about it, instead of wasting the 20-30 hours a week extra on working, I get to do that. I get to train, I get to run, I get to rest, I get to spend time with family, because since I've been dedicated, that's been a very hard part, because I grew up a lot by family. It's been very hard not to see them, because they're hanging out, I'm at the gym, or I'm just busy constantly, whether it's with work, with gym, and sponsors help me with that, basically.
And it's very hard to be a fighter doing all the things you need to do to be at your best in the cage and also be your own manager. Basically, when it comes to finding sponsors, I'm finding it myself. And unless somebody messages me and they're like, hey, I'm interested, that has happened a few times. And a lot of these people don't understand, when they're doing the favor of sponsoring me, that goes such a long way, because now you're sponsoring my dream, and to you it might not seem like anything right now, but in the future, imagine when I'm in the UFC, you get to say, hey, I helped this guy get there, you know what I mean? So if there are any sponsors that do want to work with me to see me on the Contender Series, they can message me, and we can work from there. Hit this guy up at @official_Ilyaz on Twitter. Sponsors, what are you doing? So over the past year, I know that the time that you're able to follow the UFC kind of wavers depending on what's going on, but who do you think has had, who are some fighters that have kind of inspired you over the past year, who have had good years and you like what you're seeing from them in the cage?
Last time we spoke, I think I named, fighters that I like, but some of them retired, some of them are not in the UFC anymore. But I like anybody, because especially knowing how difficult it is, I used to be the type of person who would have a favorite fighter and judge, the other one, like, oh, he's better. Anybody that's doing it, they deserve the respect. It's very difficult whether you're the champion or ranked 100 in the world. It's equally as difficult, and I respect all of them. If they're in the UFC or bigger organizations or whatever, that means they earned that spot. They, deserve it, and I wish them nothing but the best.
And I even like watching fights, quote unquote, bad fights from the UFC, fights that aren't that exciting, because it's still, fighters of a very high level. And if a fight ended up being not exciting, I, as a person who does what I do with this, I like analyzing, why the fight played out that it did, and what's next for both of those guys. A guy who got an unimpressive win and a guy that got a very unimpressive loss. It's fun to analyze, what you think is next for everybody.
Sometimes you do have nights. My coach was telling me, out of basically any high-level athlete, out of 3 successful nights, they always have one bad night. So, and that happens with a lot of fighters, where they have that one bad night, but luckily, when you continue to fight, you get judged based off every new fight. So nobody's going to say, oh, he had that one boring fight. They're going to forget that once you put on more exciting fights. So you just got to keep winning. As long as you're winning in the sport, everything is good.
And take Sean Strickland too, no one gave him a chance to beat Israel Adesanya after he gets knocked out by Alex Pereira, and then he goes out and puts on the performance of a lifetime, flawlessly executed. And it's did Izzy have an off night? Maybe, maybe, but Sean Strickland definitely had it on night.
But then it's not like he was fighting somebody off the streets or something.
Right.
You know, he's fighting a guy who is training and staying active to be a world champion. I think on any given night, if you take anybody from top 10, you make them fight the champion, they have a chance, you know, of winning. And that's exactly what he did. He got his opportunity, people counted him out, and he won. And
I think I've asked you this every single time we've talked, but especially this time. Why are you a different fighter now than you were before the Worley fight or the Massey fight? You know, both of those ranges, because I know it's an ever-evolving thing.
What? Ask that again one more time.
So, like, it's a question we talk about almost constantly. It's like, why, you know, is this Ilyaz Mamadaliyev sitting in front of me today? Why is he a different fighter than the guy that I've talked to before all these other fights?
Because that, even the last time we spoke, or previously before that, I was delusional. I really thought the world was a certain way, and I wanted to believe that it was a certain way. People like it when you win. They want to see you succeed, but there's a lot of doubters. And the people that are doubting me now are very significant people in my life. So I do want to make sure that I don't fail, not just for myself anymore, but imagine if you make it, what will those people say to you when you make it? The same people that told you you can't make it, and they predicted your possible future, which they can't, what are they going to say when you finally make it? Just hearing that congratulations is something I'm working towards.
And, you know, I won't say anything specific, nothing disrespectful, but, you know, how can you not believe in this guy, man? And you know, who roots for people, you know, to give up on their dreams? You know, there's a lot of opportunities in this sport. It's been a growing sport since it began at a major level 30 years ago, you know, and you know, every time that you could have quit, you didn't.
I've had a lot of times where I could have quit. You know, when I started my amateur career, I was 1-2, 18 years old. I remember telling people like, "Hey, I'm gonna, you know, make it." They were like, "Nope." I had my first fight, I was doubted. Second fight, doubted. Every fight I've had, I was doubted by certain people. And you know, when it's random people, I don't really care that much. But when it's people that, you know, mean something to me, it hurts. It hurts if they don't believe in me. Because if I had traits, like if I was lazy, if I was, you know, just saying that I'm gonna make it but not putting in the work, it wouldn't hurt. But because I am doing all those things, the people doubting me, it does make it a little more hurtful.
Well, you know, that's stuff you worked by, you know, and you know that you can get through that now. You know, I can't, you know, from everything we've talked about, I can't imagine a more difficult past 365 days than you've had. And there's been, you know, challenges in between every single time that we've talked. But, you know, you come through it a different fighter every time.
And, for example, I've had 5 losses in MMA. If you put all those 5 losses together, how I felt, it wouldn't compare to at least one thing that's happened to me this year or last year, you know, that I took a loss in life. Like those things were so much more significant than an MMA loss, because I'm going in there competing with an athlete that has a fighter that has a chance of beating me if it's not my night, or, you know, I make a mistake. So that I can understand. But the other things that are, you know, happening in my life, those are the real difficult losses. That's why I enjoy MMA a lot more now, because it brings me peace. Instead of me fearing, you know, fighting, I enjoy it now. I love it. I want to fight. In the past, I would be like, okay, I got this win, let me celebrate it for as long as possible so I don't have to get back in, go through the nerves again. Now I want that feeling. I embrace all of that. I want to feel nervous. I love the weigh-ins feeling. I love the fight night feeling, everything about it.
And imagine you do take a fight in Turkey, and you're fighting on the you're the main event in Turkey. Headline, the poster reads, "The Turkish Machine, the homecoming." There's so much there. But Ilyaz, it's late on a Tuesday night. It got unexpectedly chilly out here outside this Potbelly in Beaver Creek, Ohio. But it's once again been an amazing conversation, and everything, you know, anything else that you want to say, anybody else that you want to shout out, the floor is yours.
Basically, this time I want to make it I want to be a little more selfish. I want to make it about myself. And the reason being is because I've had so much doubt for no reason. I'm a nice guy who's treated everybody, respectfully. So the disrespect that I've gotten has changed me. But I do thank everybody that has disrespected me and doubted me. I wish you guys nothing but the best. But now you're going to have to watch me make it. And I'm going to do everything in my power. I don't care if I lose sleep. I don't care if I'm hungry. I don't care, how many... I'm sorry for saying this to you. I don't care how many friends I lose. Because if I'm losing friends over my dream, it's because those friends were never really my friends, Or family members acting differently with me because of me following my dream. I want people who really believe in me to stay with me till the end. But if you don't, just get out the way. That's it.
We love him here on this show, folks. This has been another interlude episode of RotoBallers' official MMA podcast. Have that. I am here once again with my favorite guest, Ilyaz Mamadaliyev. We ate some delicious Turkish food here in Beaver Creek, Ohio. Folks, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. That's where I make picks for all sorts of MMA promotions and major boxing events. Follow that guy at official_Ilyaz on Twitter. Follow him on Instagram too. He's got a great social media presence and it's only getting better. At Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Facebook. Folks, we have a UFC hiatus week. I'm putting out some awesome interlude episodes. Thanks for listening. Have a great night and peace.